Hello, everyone, and thanks for joining us on the Land Records panel discussion today. Just before we get started, we do have a brief video that we would like to play to thank two of our sponsors, North Point Geographic Solutions and 95 Degrees West Aerial. So I will play that quick and then we will get started.
North Point Geographic Solutions was founded in 2006 and is headquartered out of Duluth, Minnesota. North Point was created with the goal of offering affordable, cutting-edge GIS innovation and web development while providing excellent customer service. North Point is an Esri Silver partner. We have our Release Ready designation and several other Esri designations, including state and local government, federal small business, ArcGIS Online, and marketplace provider. We serve and support state and local government, the forestry industry, and other commercial and private agencies. Some of our past and current clients include Amherst H. Wilder Foundation, the Nature Conservancy, UPM Blandon, Red Lake Nation DNR, Environmental Protection Agency, or EPA, the state of North Dakota, and Bayfield County, Wisconsin. We offer many custom GIS solutions, including Smart Permit, a paperless permitting workflow, Backup Manager for ArcGIS Online, and Smart4, the no-hassle way to visualize and manage forestry information. Visit us at northpointgis.com or email us at info@northpointgis.com.
Thanks again to the sponsors. And with that, I will hand it over to Preston.
All right. Thanks everybody for coming here. Let me get the presentation back going again. Okay. Sound good? Do you think everybody can see that?
Yep, looks good.
Okay. All right, everybody, thanks for coming. This is the Minnesota Geospatial Advisory Council Parcel and Land Records Committee panel discussion. We're gonna, the four of us, myself, Preston, Dowell, Alison, Slaats, Ryan, Stovern, and Pat Veraguth. We're gonna talk to you about the Parcel and Land Records Committee, what it is, what we do, and what we've been working on here in the past year. We got a lot of kind of fun stuff that we've been doing. So, quick introductions. I am Preston Dowell. I am a deputy county surveyor for St. Louis County, Minnesota. Alison Slaats, she is with the MnGeo. Ryan Stovern, he is GS principal down in the St. Louis County Auditor's Office. And Pat Veraguth, he is the Douglas County surveyor. And each one of them will probably give you a little information as they introduce themselves when they do have their separate sections within the presentation. And if any of our other panelists want to just chime in whenever they feel free to. Okay. So the Geospatial Advisory Council, well, it's the Minnesota Geospatial Advisory Council. I imagine most of you are familiar with what they are, but the council acts as So their guiding statement: the council acts as the coordinating body of Minnesota geospatial community, represents cross-section of an organization, includes city, county, university, et cetera, et cetera. You don't need me to read that for you. But basically, the Geospatial Advisory Council really works for the geospatial community as a whole. What they're trying to do is get everybody together, get everybody on the same page so that we can kind of move forward with the geospatial data that you as practitioners or users, deal with every day. So we're going to try and figure out a way to get this a little more interactive, because we know that these virtual presentations can be kind of dry sometimes. So we did come up with a couple poll questions. So I'm going to launch the first poll question. And that poll question is, what sector do you work in? And so you should be seeing that on your screen. If you could please answer that, and it just gives us an idea of who we're talking to. If there's anything that we want to focus on here, it'll help us out. And if you have any questions throughout the presentation, we're not going to open up mics, I don't think, but please either put them in the chat or put them in the Q&A sessions, and we'll be trying to monitor that as we go along throughout the presentation here. Okay, so all right, looks like we've pretty much got most folks here. We got a couple people from the cities, primarily county. We're at 50% county employees, 11% are private, 18% are state, and we got one person from academia. So, now the numbers are moving a little bit, but they're not changing a whole heck of a lot. So yeah, mostly government folks, a couple private folks, and some people that work in academia. So, here, I can share the results. I don't know what that does, what that looks like, but there's our results. Kind of neat. All right, so with that, we'll kind of move on here. So the GAC, what is the GAC? The Minnesota Geospatial Advisory Council. We lovingly call it the GAC. It's one of those great acronyms that you can say out loud. Each year, the GAC goes through a process, and they set priorities on what they want to focus on for the year. There's a big spreadsheet. There's a survey that comes out every year, and I don't know if they're going to be doing that during this. Usually, it's the survey that comes out during the conference. I haven't seen anything on that, but I imagine that we'll be seeing that survey come out to look for polling the community as far as what they believe the priorities are. And then the GAC goes through a process of determining what their priorities are for the year and what they want to focus on, what they want to try and get done. And this past year, there was a priority. There were about 15 priorities that were kind of active. There were a whole bunch of other ones that were inactive, where they're priorities. People want to get some work done, but if you don't have people that are willing to actually work on it and move it forward, it's hard to call it a priority if you can't do anything with it. So the reason I highlighted the 3 priorities here that I highlighted is that those are the 3 that kind of fall under the purview of the Parcel and Land Records Committee. And those are the number 1, 2, and 13 priorities. Number 1 is statewide publicly available parcel data. Number 2 is updated and aligned boundary data from authoritative sources. And number 13 is remonumentation of all section corners in the state. So these are priorities that were identified in those surveys and then voted on by the GAC as things that they wanted to move forward on. And then we had some people that were willing to kind of take the lead on these different initiatives. Alison with the statewide available parcel data, myself with the boundary alignment data, and Pat with the remonumentation work. So we're trying to move those things, move the needle on these projects and kind of keep them moving forward. So all these priorities, theoretically are going to fall under the purview of one of the committees of the GAC. And again, these 3 kind of fall under the Parcel and Land Records Committee. So very quick history of the Parcel and Land Records. I'm not a historian of the Parcel and Land Records Committee. I've only been involved with it for maybe 5 years, kind of in its newest iteration. But the charter statement is work to promote research educate and implement and distribute statewide guidelines surrounding digital mapping of cadastral and related data. Works to promote and facilitate development and sharing of data throughout the state, region, and nation. Also advises MnGeo. So there's a pretty, obviously, parcel land records. It's pretty heavily focused on land records. So one of the things we wanted, another one of our poll questions we were going to ask, which let me see if I can find that one. Oh wait, no, that's right. This one we were gonna, it was one that we wanted to ask a question, but we wanted you to put the answer in the chat. So, because it's not really conducive to the polls, I guess. So how do you utilize land records? As you as an end user of land records, in whatever way, shape, or form, how do you utilize those? If you kind of want to put some answers in the chat, we'd really like to see that. And I see somebody raised their hand. We could. Yeah, if you want to just put your answer in the chat, and that'll kind of show everybody. Everybody can kind of take a look at that and see how they use them, and we can kind of, hopefully, we can utilize that as a way of talking to you and maybe hopefully answer some questions as we go through here. So we got land use agreements, tax parcels. That's going to be a big focus of what we talk about here today. Oh, I like that. Working towards an enterprise land record system. Drainage and utility easements, finding parcel data. Give it another minute or so here. And I'll just kind of, and as we look at these, you can kind of see there's all kinds of different uses for land records. There's all kinds of different things that people utilize these for. So when we talk about, we're going to talk about boundary alignment as a great example. When we talk about that, we're going to talk about there's a whole wide world of different, what we quote unquote boundaries that we talk about when we're talking about geospatial data. So it's good to see that people are using the land records in a whole bunch of different ways, and we'll get to that when we start talking about boundary alignment as well. So the Parcel and Land Records Committee, come on, move, there we go. They were the Digital Cadastral Committee, and then they transitioned over to Land Records Modernization Committee, and eventually turned into the Parcel Land Records Committee. They developed the Minnesota Parcel Data Standard, and that was a parcel data standard that allowed for the transfer and facilitative sharing digital parcel data. And Ryan, you were very involved with that. How long ago has that been implemented? When did you guys finalize that standard?
Not yet. That's a tough question.
Yeah, I do.
I want to say it was 2014, 2015, 2016, somewhere in there that was finalized.
Okay.
But it was decades in the working to get that part. I came on with the data standard when I started working at Lake County in 2011. Back when it was DC digital count, the cadastral data committee. So yeah, so it's been going on for a long time.
Okay, so it's kind of been out there probably for at least 5 years, you'd say.
Yeah, give or take a little bit.
So one of our poll questions, just to get a feel for it, how many of you are using the parcel data standard as a data producer? Obviously, if you're just a user, you probably wouldn't, if you're just an end user, you're probably not going to know the difference. But if you're managing your GIS data and your tax parcel data, are you utilizing this? So I think this will be a good poll for us to see how well that worked, and maybe what we can, in the future, we may have to look at it again and see if we need to make some improvements on it. That's probably a whole different ball of wax too, of course. Oh, thanks, Nancy. That's a great point. Nancy put in the chat to find out more about the standard at the MnGeo standards website. So it doesn't, we got a couple folks that have implemented it. obviously I'd say Ryan's probably implemented at St. Louis County. I sure as heck hope so. Most people, it seems like most people are working towards implement it, and then the other half are no. So we got kind of a 50-50 split at this point. So that's good. It looks like it's getting some uptake. People are, hopefully as you're transitioning your data, you're looking at it, seeing if it works for you. If you do have any comments, questions on that, feel free to reach out to us at the Parcel Land Records Committee. That's one of the things that we need to make sure that we're keeping on top of. If there's a reason people aren't utilizing it, maybe we can do something about that. And it's definitely something that we should be keeping abreast on, so that it doesn't just kind of languish as something that people aren't using. We want to make sure that that's a good standard for people to utilize as they're moving forward and updating their parcel data. So in the poll, I'll share the results here. I don't know what that looks like on your screen, but like I say, it's about a 50-50 split. It's all said and done. So after that transfer standard was developed, we pivoted, the Parcel Land Records really pivoted to improving the parcel data quality and focus on integrating survey data, because once you have this standard, once you have parcel data, there's the thought that, well, we have our parcel data, we're done. Well, anybody that manages parcel data knows that that's not the case. It's constantly changing and it's constantly improving. Part of that is because you have, subdivisions and splits and combinations and different things. The other part of that is as surveys get completed and better information as far as the PLSS comes into play, people are finding, and we'll talk about this under boundary alignment, but people are finding that their geospatial data just is not lining up the way they expected it to. So really wanted to focus more on improving the data quality as a whole across the state. Okay, and Jared has a point here in his in the chat here about the problem with the data standard is that most of the data, their data comes from their tax systems, which may not have field names throughout the states. He thinks the project needs to be brought to assessors and recorders as well. So, and that's something that maybe at some point we should start looking at. How do we get more people adopting this, and not just in geospatial world, maybe in other parts as well. So the structure, the Parcel and Land Records Committee was basically just one committee that worked on the parcel data standard. But after this spring, when these different priorities were identified, we decided to break it into 3 separate subcommittees that would work on the specific priorities. So we started with the open parcel data subcommittee, and they're going to focus on priority 1 of the Geospatial Advisory Committee, and that is statewide publicly available data. So they got a couple of goals: to build an aggregated parcel viewer, educate users on proper parcel data usage, work with outreach and committee to advocate for open data. And that's what Ryan and Alison will talk about next. Boundary alignment subcommittee, that is the number 2 priority. That's updated and aligned boundary data from authoritative sources. I'm the chair of that subcommittee, and our goal is to build a PLSS inventory map and increase awareness of why this alignment is necessary, and facilitate and document alignment activities throughout the state. And then Pat's going to talk about the Remonumentation subcommittee. That Remonumentation subcommittee is put together to go with address priority 13, the remonumentation of all section corners, and the goal is to build a legislative proposal for remonumentation. So with that, we'll switch it over to Ryan and Alison, and they can go ahead and they can start discussing the open parcel data subcommittee.
Awesome, thanks, Preston. All right, so I'm Ryan Stovern. I am the St. Louis County in the Auditor's Office GS Principal, and I'll let Alison introduce herself quick again.
Hey everybody, I'm Alison Slaats. I work for MnGeo.
Yeah, so Alison and I will be taking the next, I don't know how many slides, 10 or 12 slides, and splitting them up and kind of covering different things. So just to give a quick overview, Preston did do some open parcel data subcommittee of the PLRC. Our overall goals for this subcommittee was build better relations amongst neighboring counties, and we'll get into that a little bit here as we go, and make Minnesota parcel data free and open, and hopefully publish a statewide data set for parcels within the GAC standard. And we're also exploring the data attribution, which one of the gentlemen brought up in the chat, and how to do things. And that's one of the things that we are looking into and discussing. But within the open parcel data subcommittee, we have 4 work groups: online communication, operational as well, county outreach, and then PRISM exploration with the Department of Revenue. Next slide, please, Preston. The next few slides they're just maps. So currently, as of August 9th, so it's maybe outdated, not sure. This is the current status of free and open data within the geospatial community within Minnesota. You can see that there's 15 counties that are open with policies, and there's 30 open with no policies, and then 42 we do not know about. They're unknown or not open. So we're trying to get this map filled as much as possible to be more green. It is a long road, but we'll get there. Next slide, please, Preston. So through the work of the open data, the county outreach within the open data, we've been going through and trying to find different data sets to create whatnot. Of parcel data throughout the 87 counties, currently 42 of the 87 counties have downloadable parcel data on their website or through the GeoCommons with MnGeo. Mille Lacs and Sibley counties have data available, but we are unsure of their open data status, but they do have data available for download. Some of the counties are maybe sharing the GAC parcel standards and others are not. And this is one of our objectives, is to work on getting the counties either sharing data with us and we're able to translate the data for them, or help them translate the data and export it out into the GAC standard. Next slide, please, Preston. Thank you. This is another little one to just throw out there, since we are talking about some remonumentation and boundary alignment. In the work that I did with county outreach, of the 87 counties, 13 currently have PLSS corner survey control available for download. 60 of the 87 counties have digitally available or digital parcel corner control data. So it's improved quite a bit over the last few years. Alrighty. Next slide, please, Preston. I will hand this off to Alison.
Thank you, Ryan. So of those 4 work groups that Ryan talked about, this is the first one. And really, if you think about making open data, one of the first things that we need to do is explain to people why that's important. So this work group is really focusing on communication about why open data, and specifically why a statewide parcel data set will be useful to people. So Katie Rossman from the DNR is leading this work group, and we're several members there. And the goals of this work group are to create a story map that really explains the business need for a statewide aggregated parcel data set in the GAC standard. And we wanted to also make a web map as part of that to show and link to county websites. So the story map will have stories about use cases and business needs for why this data is important statewide. Some stories we're working towards are for emergency management and planning, forest fires, evacuation plans, uses by nonprofits, and utilities, things like planning for solar farms and wind energy. But I did notice some other good ideas in the chat there. So I know Katie's online too, so I think we'll be taking some notes on other stories we can include in this outreach. So the target audience for this story map we're creating is really county leaders, surveyors, legislators, so we can share how why it's useful, why it will be useful for counties to share this data and for us to come up with this statewide parcel data set together. So what's being shown on this slide is the web map that we've already produced that will go into the story map. So this is available already online, and it shows that open data status that Ryan already described. And there's just, we've clicked on Douglas County there, and you can see there's a couple of links on this map. It's a pretty simple map, but one is to the downloadable data link if there is one, and one is to a parcel map viewer. If you see that on any of these maps your county is wrong, or if you click on this map and your link's not there, please let us know and we'll update that. Let's go to the next slide. So the second work group that we have on our list here for the open data subcommittee is the operational team. Really, this is a small team of us working on how we get to this statewide parcel data. So, last group's working on the why, this is the how. So you may know, especially if you're a county, that MnGeo requests parcel data from all the counties quarterly. Then MnGeo makes an aggregated data set in the GAC using the GAC attribute standard or the GAC standard and shares that with other state agencies. This is done to reduce the number of times that counties, the data producers, are asked for the data set, so you don't get asked for it by DOT and DNR and other state agencies. So we can make one request and share it with other state agencies. So MnGeo does the work of converting the data from however the county gives it to us into the GAC standard. And as you saw in the poll, and Ryan mentions, several counties are sharing in the GAC standard, but not all. And if you go to the next slide, one of the things we're doing is sort of creating this cross-reference. So Bill Mitchell, who I think's on the call too, does a lot of this coding with the, and Casey Rankle, who's our student worker, also assists with a lot of this work. So we've automated this process. And just last quarter, we started sharing spreadsheets back to the counties to make sure we're doing that translation between a county field names and the GAC standard correctly. So you can see here's just a snapshot of these couple of reports that we've sent back. So the GAC field on the left-hand side, and then the columns we're using to map to those fields on the columns BCD. And sometimes we split a field in order to do that. Sometimes we use multiple fields to create the attribute. So if you go to the next slide, we are looking for feedback from the counties if we're doing that correctly. And then the other thing we're doing in this group is working towards figuring out the key fields, really how many of the fields in the GAC standards are counties sharing. And we have a summary of that here. So you can see some counties are sharing all 92 fields, which is crazy, right? In the standard, and other counties aren't sharing so many. So as we continue to do this outreach, and Ryan will talk about the County Outreach Committee next, this is one of the things they can take back to the counties as we're doing this outreach from the committee, and ask counties how we can help them overcome the barriers to sharing more of these fields with MnGeo. And then, ultimately when MnGeo, with the work of this committee, moves towards publishing a aggregated data set. Ryan, I'm going to pass it back to you on that note.
Awesome, thanks, Allison. So Allison talked about the first two groups. So I'm going to kind of get into the county outreach team, and this is one that we've been doing a lot of work. We've been trying to find ways to build on working on communication. One of the big things that we've been discussing as a group is a regional approach to working with neighbors, trying to get everyone on the same page with neighboring counties, when it comes to data sharing and stuff. I know here in the Arrowhead, we share county data with our neighboring counties pretty easily. And that's because we were forced to due to wildfires and stuff. We just have to get on the same page, make sure data is in the same structure and whatnot. And that's kind of pushing here as we're working with a regional approach. We're able to work with our neighbors and easily share data amongst them. If there's natural disasters and so forth, then we don't have to worry about different schemas between data and whatnot. So here's the county outreach team. I am leading this along with Mark Sloan, Chad Martini, Pat Veraguth, Stacey Stark, Katie Rossman, and Alison as well. Our overall goals for this outreach team is to be able to publish an aggregated parcel data set within the GAC standard. It sounds easy, but it really isn't. Not all counties, as Alison, and we'll get more in depth in this as well, not all counties do share in the GAC standard. And we're trying to figure out how to take the data that we do get from the counties, and then I'll talk about this here in a little bit, is then use the Department of Revenue PRISM data to hopefully offset some of the data that the counties may not know how to get or translate into the parcel data. So we're working on trying to figure out how to do that. One of the big things that this group is going to work on is we're going to work on writing letters to all the counties from the committee about publishing opening data, and then also look at doing a little survey of different things of, if you are publishing data, are you using the GAC standard, simple questions like that. We're still formalizing those questions. So hopefully sometime early next year, those will be going out to counties. Another thing is, like I said, we were talking about a regional approach. This is keeping our geographic regions smaller to focus on. Instead of focusing on the whole entire state at one time, we're able to focus on the regional areas. So it's the Southwest or the Southeast, Central Lakes area, and so forth. One of the things that we're looking at doing first off is being able to publish the 45 counties that we receive, that MnGeo does get by region. This is one of the things that we're going to, when we write the letters to the counties that are open, because they only have to share to MnGeo, but we'd like to see if they'll allow MnGeo to publicly share that data with everyone else outside of state agencies. So that's where our big hurdle is right now. And then just create outreach from the counties, from the GAC and MnGeo, just kind of bring everyone together, closer together, working together more, build better relationships between everybody. So here is our unofficial regions. We've been discussing different things. So we have 15 current regions in the state. Some of the regions are being looked at and consolidating. I know over by Douglas County where Pat's at, we're going to be consolidating some of the counties there. We just want to get to the point where neighbors can work with neighbors. When it comes to data, natural disasters, like I said, don't know administrative boundaries. So they may have to share data across to help each other out. And our big thing is to find individuals in all these regions to help move our goal forward of trying to create this publicly wide data set. And then we're also going to be emailing, like I said earlier, questions to the counties and asking them to respond back with different answers so we can help drive the ship a little bit more and guide us into how to get this data available and how to help counties be able to ETL their data into the GAC standard. Next slide, Preston, please. So I talked earlier about the 45 counties that are currently available for open data. So we're looking at potentially publishing these data. So if we were to publish the parcel data in the regions, these are the areas that would have parcel data. So we break that out into the regions. So the Arrowhead would be pretty much covered, and then the Twin Cities area and some of the Southeast, and then be able to help neighboring counties get into that regional approach as well, and then help these counties as well get into the GAC standard. And then the biggest part is communication, getting the communication between everybody on how to share data, questions they need, or if they have questions about technology. That's where we're looking at when it comes to that aspect of it. All right, press the next slide, please. All right, so that was pretty much the county outreach. There's a lot going on there, and there's a tons going on. And the next one is, so we, back in 2011, 2012, Mark can correct me too if I, back when Prism was first being talked about, the Department of Revenue, is the same time that we're really hitting the current data standard hard with fields and whatnot. And we did explore the difference between what Prism was looking at the time and then what the MnGeo and the GAC were looking at as well. So we decided with this new uptick that we would look at exploring what Prism has to offer now. So Sally Wakefield, who is a GIS specialist at Department of Revenue, is helping us out here quite a bit. And Mike also works at the Department of Revenue with her. And then myself and Katie are on the team as well. And the overall goal of this is to evaluate the Prism data to the GAC standard. And for the most part, this team has done the work that they've been asked to do. There's still some things to do, but they've gone through and compared what the Prism data and the GAC standard look like. And the next slide explains this perfectly. So in the GAC standard, 89 data elements in the GAC standard, here's how they line up with the Prism. 17 are required in Prism. 19 may be able to be derived from Prism if they are included. And then 54 are not included in data submissions to Prism. And the data submissions to Prism come from the county's auditor's office and tax systems. You can see the breakdown here and so forth too, what Prism requires. But to go with this too is we may be able to derive some of the data from Prism that is needed for the GAC standard. We're just looking at this not as a full out replacement of people not having to give data in the GAC standard or information. We're just looking if we're able to supplement what data is missing that we get from the counties and populate it, potentially using Prism data to populate that information so we can have a more complete GAC standard for each county. So it's a lot of work. They've been working really hard on this stuff. And we're just trying to derive and determine where additional attributes can come from. And once we can get this figured out, we can go back to the counties along with the spreadsheets Alison has already sent out and say, hey, here's where we know there's data coming from, and here's how you potentially can get to it, and help the counties ETL the data into the GAC standard if possible. If not, we'll be able to then have folks like Alison and stuff at MnGeo to be able to extract the data from the Department of Revenue and whatnot, and then populate the fields that need to be there. So there's a long road to go, but this is where we're at right now when it comes to the Open Parcel Data Subcommittee.
All right, thanks, Ryan. Let me see here. Let me get my video back on here. Okay, thanks, Ryan. Thanks, Alison. So that is the Open Parcel Data Subcommittee of the PLRC. They addressed priority 1. Priority 2 of the GAC is update and align boundary data from authoritative sources. This is the subcommittee that I am involved with, and long story short is that, there's most of us that are in land records know that there are all kinds of statewide data sets out there that purport to represent the same thing, but sometimes they don't, or in many cases, I'd say in most cases, they don't actually align when you start compiling those together. And that includes the PLSS boundaries and foundational layers that many of the GIS, especially parcel data, is built upon. The reality is there's no one organization that's responsible to develop and maintain that statewide sort of boundary data, and that's the way it works in Minnesota, right? Who does the geospatial work? It's assigned to the counties, to the local municipalities, and then it goes up from the bottom. It goes from the bottom up, not from the top down. And the reality is it's actually a very good system, but we do have some challenges once we try to start to aggregate those data sets. So another poll question here that we wanted to ask and see what you guys thought, but have you had any problems with misaligned geospatial data? And I'm not just talking necessarily about county boundaries or PLSS. I mean, it could be anything. It could be emergency service district. It could be you name it, whatever kind of boundary geospatial boundary that you have come across, have you ever seen it not align with another one when you bring it into your geospatial data set? So we'll keep that going here for a little bit. The reality is I'm watching the poll numbers come in, and it's pretty close to what I would expect. Most people are seeing this is why it's one of the higher priorities on the GAC's list, is because even in our small group here, 95% of people have seen that there is issues when you start to compile this data, whatever that data may be. So we've got an issue here with our geospatial data. We got to figure out how to get it aligned and how to get it working, so that it's the best representation. We're never going to get anything perfect. We know that. That's not what geospatial data is intended to do, but it shouldn't cause confusion. It shouldn't cause issues in the long run. And that's why we talk about boundary alignment in the geospatial sense. So a couple goals of the boundary alignment subcommittee is to build a PLSS inventory map, which I'll talk about in a little bit, and also increase the awareness on why alignment is necessary. I think us as geospatial professionals, yes, we understand why this is necessary, but the end user may not see that as important. They might not understand it, because they might not know that there's an issue until it's too late. So we want to try and figure out ways that we can build that awareness of what's going on. And then Ryan was talking about those regional groups. We also want to work with those regional groups to start define and document boundary alignment procedures, because it's easier to work, with someone, your neighbor, and look at a single, let's say you're talking about a county boundary, which is one of the things we're gonna talk about. It's easier for us to talk to our adjacent county and work with that one county rather and focus on and fix that one issue, and we can work with them together to fix that issue. It's a lot easier to work with them than it is to say, okay, we're gonna fix all 87 counties all at once. I mean, that's a pretty overwhelming problem. So if we can take that regional approach, like Ryan was talking about, and we can just take it step by step, hopefully we can start building good processes and procedures, and that can spread across the state, and people can just start working with their neighbors and, have friendly handshakes and maybe a cup of coffee together, and, get their different boundaries aligned. And once we all start doing that, as the data then goes from the bottom, from the source data sets that you all are maintaining and coming up into, higher level data sets, things will start to align, and things will actually start to make sense, and hopefully alleviate these alignment issues. That's the theory. So when we talk about boundaries, we're talking about a whole bunch of different things. As a surveyor, when I think about a boundary, I think about a monument in the ground that's on one end of a line, and another monument on the other end of the line, and then a line straight in between those two monuments, and that is a boundary line. So when I talk about a boundary, that's what I'm thinking as a surveyor. When when Ryan's thinking about a boundary, or anybody that's maintaining parcel data, you're thinking about tax parcel boundaries. Those are a whole different thing. They're similar. They're not intended to be the same thing. The tax parcels are not intended to be a property boundary or a legal boundary. They're just intended to be some sort of boundary that shows what the county intends to tax. If you're in emergency services, maybe your district boundary is along a road line. That's a form of a boundary. Election districts, there's all kinds of different types of boundaries. So what we wanted to do is we wanted to come up with, what boundaries are and what alignment means. So came up with a definition that tells us, it's kind of long. I won't necessarily read it all out to you. I'm sure you guys will have the slides after the fact, so you can go through and read all this. I'll hit some highlights on it. And that was the first one, was boundaries are different things. And some boundaries are physical, like I said about those monuments. Maybe those roads are a physical thing, but also other boundaries are invisible, and they can only really be represented on a map. They can only be represented digitally, right? I mean, maybe a watershed boundary is a squiggly contour line, through the wilderness somewhere. You want to make sure that boundary aligns with other squiggly lines through the wilderness. And again, you're not going to represent those on the ground, but they can be represented on the map, and they should be aligned when they get brought in together. So when it comes down to it, there are some organizations that update their data, and some that don't when they're maintaining their geospatial data. And that's what leads to these gaps and these overlaps and these alignment issues that we talk about when we're talking about boundary alignment. So, in an ideal world, everybody would be working on the exact same basis. Everybody would be working on the exact same coordinate system, and you would have absolutely zero gaps and overlaps. That would be in a perfect world, but in reality, that's very difficult to do. So, the reality is we may need to come to an agreement about when we're talking about these geospatial boundaries, when is good enough good enough? When is it aligned? Is it aligned when they're absolutely 100% coincident without any sort of question? Or maybe is it if they're within a defined tolerance based on what that geospatial data set is being utilized for? So those are the kind of questions that we're looking at when it comes to boundary alignment. What does boundary alignment mean? And when we settled on, there should be a tolerance that's allowed, because if we try to go with the absolute perfect 100% coincident data, we're probably going to have issues. Now, that doesn't mean that we're at least issues with getting it implemented. That doesn't mean that we're going to, that tolerance is going to be for a county boundary is going to be 500 feet. That's not within tolerance. We're talking, a foot, maybe half a foot, something like that, where we know that it's not going to cause issues. If somebody does notice a gap or an overlap, it's not going to cause issues. Now, this next slide, the reason why we talk about this is a slide that is a great example of why we really need to, as a community, think about this hard. Anybody that knows me knows that I am an avid hunter. So this is OnX web mapping. I pay, X number of dollars a year, I don't even know, and I can get parcel data throughout the entire United States. And where do they get that parcel data? They get that from you. I don't know if they're downloading it. I don't know if they're buying it. I don't know what they're doing, but they're compiling it all together and they're publishing it, and people are looking at it and utilizing it and saying, well, I'm on, XYZ property. So if you look at this particular example, this is the boundary line between St. Louis County and Lake County. And as you can see, we got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 separate lines going in a north-south direction that all represent the exact same line. I know that there's not different parcels in here. This is all representing one particular line. So what's going on here? We've got some overlapping data sources that aren't aligning up. And so that's what we're talking about. And this is not a small area. This is about 300 feet here. And this is not uncommon in my area. And I'm sure many of you can probably tell us stories about these same sorts of issues in your areas. And maybe they're not quite as big, but 300 feet is pretty big, but you know what? So is 100 feet, so is 50 feet. So we got to figure out a way to start building this data more responsibly so that the end user, when they come out here and they look at this thing, they're not confused. Because as an end user, I would look at this thing and say, well, I guess nobody really knows what's going on out here, so I can do whatever the heck I want. And that's not necessarily the case. If this was private property, we'd have some major issues here, wouldn't we? We'd have landowners on one side saying one thing and landowners on the other side saying another. And that happens quite literally all the time. So here's another example of that same, not that same area, but a similar area where the blue cyan line here, that represents the representation of our boundary, of our county boundary that St. Louis has. The kind of tan or grayish line, that's what Lake County says. And the orange line, that's what the CAD NSDI says. You see in there, and there's actually 2 lines in there. So even the CAD NSDI can't even agree as far as where it thinks that boundary is. So what is boundary alignment? Boundary alignment is figuring out a way to do this, saying, you know what, those 4 lines in that case are actually one line. We got to make sure that they're represented properly that way. So the reality is PLSS corners are key to many boundary alignment issues. PLSS corners are not, most of those corners are not certified in the state. Pat's going to talk about to that extent next. And most of them don't have a known geodetic position. And as corners are remonumented and located, their geodetic position can be determined, and parcel data should be updated to reflect that data. So one of the questions we had, another poll question, is something, you know, what do you know about the PLSS? I've mentioned it a couple different times here, but what is your familiarity with it? Is it the PLS is the PL what? Or maybe I've heard of it, or maybe it's those things you see surveyors on the side of the road taking pictures of, or I'm a surveyor, so why are you even asking a silly question? So I'll just kind of get a feel for what people know out there. All right. We get to that magic 65%, and I think that's where people pretty much stop. So, ooh, 71 today. So we'll share the results here. Yeah, you know, most people know what the PLSS is, but you know, there's a couple people that don't know out there. For those of you who don't know, the PLSS is a system of disposing of land that the United States implemented in the 18 and 1900s here, early 1900s in Minnesota. And they basically went across the state and set section corners and quarter section corners every half a mile, and then use those corners and the maps generated from them to sell off all the property for private ownership and development. So those corners are the actual physical location, the physical location of the corners on the ground are what surveyors are looking for. And then hopefully what's happening is that as we find those things and we certify them and we put them in, you know, we assign a geodetic coordinate to it, we can share that with our geospatial counterparts. Sometimes we do, you know, some surveyors maintain the parcel data, some surveyors don't. Like in our county, I don't maintain the parcel data. That's where our auditor's office comes in. But we work together to update the parcel data with that information because it is the best information available and it is the most accurate information that we have. And we want to make sure that the parcel data is as representative as it possibly can be. So for us to get to the point where we can align these things and start working on boundary alignment, we really got to know where our corner information is in the first place. So a couple of years back, we developed a tool that is there to show where PLSS corners are certified in Minnesota. Yep, and Ryan has the link to that map. I will show a screenshot of it, but I encourage you to go ahead and take a quick look at that map, click on it, explore it. It's going to give you a feel for what we have out there as far as known PLSS corners in the state of Minnesota. It's really only intended to be a basic inventory, though. It's not going to be detailed. It's not going to give you an XYZ coordinate on section corners or anything like that. It's just a way to visualize where the corners are on the state. Our long-term goal is to populate this data for all the different counties in Minnesota, you know, and possibly come up with a standard for PLSS corner data. And MnGeo, and just got the email today, is very close to finalizing this. They're working on taking this map and hosting it on MnGeo servers. So hopefully with that, we'll be able to share that out on the GAC hub and the GAC website and get more people aware that this map is out there and available for their use. And basically, this map is going to tell you a little bit about the PLSS, and then it's going to point you back to the data authority. So it's going to show you where maybe there's some section corners, but if you want to get that information, you're going to have to go to the data source, which is generally the county surveyor, whether that's a full-time surveyor or a part-time surveyor or some combination thereof. So the map here, this is just a screenshot of the map. Again, like it's a pretty straightforward map. There's some tabs across the top that gives you some general background on the PLSS, examples of corner certificates, shows you where the data is available. And, you know, it's broken up into then chapters of Minnesota State or Minnesota Professional or Society of Professional Surveyor chapters. Broke it into that so that we had some sort of control as far as how big of an area we wanted to represent on the map. So people can kind of look at that. So that, like I said, that's going to be transitioning over to MnGeo servers here, and hopefully be live here in the next probably week or so, I would imagine. And hopefully we want to work on populating this, because we got some information when we first started and then it kind of dried up. But it's going to take a lot. It might take a lot of work to actually go out there and start populating this data from different sources. But we are working with that open parcel data group, because they're finding, as they're reaching out, they're finding more information is out there and more digital information is out there than we knew about when we first built this thing. So it's really coming around nicely. We've also started working on a county boundary determination, and that's kind of a misnomer there. I mean, we can't determine where the county boundaries are. Those are defined by statutes, but we're looking at trying to show a best practices of how to best determine that spatial representation on a county boundary. And the legal position of that boundary is a whole different animal. But again, when we're talking about boundary alignment, we're talking about sharing data. There's no reason why, county X and county Y shouldn't be able to figure out how to spatially represent the same boundary. If it's along a river, it's gonna move. That's the way rivers are. But then that means that county X and county Y are going to have to figure out ways to adjust as the river moves. Is that every 5 years? Is that every 10 years? I don't know. But we're working on some documentation, trying to figure out the best way to go about spatially representing those county boundaries. The reality is for this project to work, the long-term goal, we need to remonument the PLSS along county boundaries. If we have that, that's gonna be the first example of boundary alignment. It's gonna help each individual county to start aligning with their adjacent counties. And then a lot of these issues could kind of go away, because if you're aligning with your adjacent county boundary, you're probably okay. There's not a lot of cross-jurisdictional boundaries out there. There are, I mean, like I said, watersheds do that. Any natural feature is going to do that. But if you're aligning your data within your own county, within your own municipality, if it's all aligned, then as it goes up the chain and it goes up into different data sets, the amount of issues that you're going to see should be, they should lessen as time goes on, if we start from a good geospatial, a good PLSS framework in the first place. So that's one of the reasons why the next priority, which is the remonumentation of section corners, was put on the GAC priority list. And I think with that, I will switch it over to Pat. Wait, hold on here. We have a question. If we have updates to PLSS corners and their certification status, who should we send those to? Thanks for the question, Kevin. It depends on the county. Some counties require, like in my county, we record those corner certificates. You send those to our office, the county surveyor's office, and then we'll get those recorded for you. Some counties do not require recordation. They just require them to be filed in the county surveyor's office. Some counties just require it to be filed in the recorder's office. I mean, they're literally just a file cabinet in the recorder's office. So it really depends on the jurisdiction. So if there's a county surveyor, talk to them. If there's a part-time county surveyor, talk to them. If you have another, any GIS people that that work in the area, ask them. Or if you have any questions and you can't figure out what to do with them, give one of us a call at Max, and we'll help you out and figure that out for you. Who on the boundary alignment should we send our updated GIS data set? Oh yeah, that would probably be, send it to me and we'll get her updated. I love that. That's perfect. Thank you.
And Preston, I want to add that too. If you actually have it as a service, if we're able to send the REST endpoint, that way it just continuously updates as REST endpoint gets updated as well.
Okay, I guess that's up to me now. I'm Pat Veraguth. I'm the Douglas and the Grant County Surveyor and Chair of the PLS Public Land Survey System Remonumentation Legislation Subcommittee. I've been surveying for about 28 years in Minnesota. Love remonumentation. It's kind of like looking for gold. Kind of runs in your veins after you do it for quite a while. So we're focusing on funding for remonumentation of public land survey system in Minnesota and to bring the PLS into the 21st century. This picture to the left, go back once. I want to talk about Thomas Jefferson. Was recently took a trip out to DC and wanted to visit Thomas Jefferson. He's a originator of the public land survey system. I did do a selfie, but I thought this was a nicer picture of it. So next slide, please. So this are all the members of our subcommittee. We do have recently added 2 people to it, the examiner titles and the BLM surveyor. We have a county recorder, that's also a county surveyor, a few MnDOT people in there. So we're getting a pretty good mix of people there, and it's a pretty fast and moving committee. We're meeting every week, doing a lot of work and a lot of discussion, a lot of good discussion, and a lot of things that we need to cover and take care of in this. So, next slide, please. So preserving the public land survey system. I had a couple analogies. I had started out with one that was just, I can think of it as a pegboard over the whole state, but recently I come up with a new one. You can think the PLS as glue and chipboard, and all the wood chips are parcels. And if you don't have the glue, the chips fall apart into a pile of chips. So you think the state of Minnesota can think of a house without a roof on it, and as time goes by, things disappear and fall apart. If you don't have siding on your house, the siding, the chips will start falling apart and the glue start to dissolve after water hits it. So it's kind of like that. We have to take care and we have to maintain it. So we need to put a good roof on and a good siding on it. So that's kind of what this community is working on. So next slide. So what is the PLS? It's a legal geographic framework covering 2/3 of the United States. There's 30 states that have the PLS system initiated in it. There's a couple others that have partial PLSs in them. It's a basis for all property descriptions in the state. It enables secure transfer of property. And it also describes where. I mean, that big question, where it is on the earth. So 90% of data is related to the framework. All kinds of data is related to that. Municipalities, parcels, roads, zoning, just about anything you can think of is related to the PLSS. So next slide, please. So PLS in Minnesota. We recently did a count about, well, it's probably been 5 years ago that we did a count. We have over 300,000 PLS corners in the state. We have less than half of those corners have certificates on them, and probably less than half of those probably have geodetic coordinates on them. So this is a map that's populating here from Rod Squares and all the township and range lines in the state. PLS started in Minnesota about 1847 and ended in the early 1900s. These are just the township lines, and they came back. There are 6 mile square townships in the state, and they came back and subdivide these townships into 36 mile square sections. So next slide. So surveyors are charged with putting these monuments back to where they originally set by the original government surveyors in the 1800s. Evidence of the PLS is supported by monuments. So the original monuments in the ground by law define the PLS. They were continued to be further used as further to subdivide property. The original surveyors kept a field book, which is in the upper left-hand corner. They wrote notes for each line that they ran. And after they came back to the office, the drafters would draft the GLO plats of the whole township. And this lower left-hand corner is a GLO post that we found in Douglas County this summer. The first whole GLO post that I've ever found in 28 years of surveying. Had the section It's described in the top of it, which was a pretty cool find. And we were pretty proud to find that. So it was down in a corridor road down about 4 feet. If you look at the picture, you can see is a wet area, which preserved it, which doesn't always happen. So you don't find a lot of those, but we found a lot of wood stakes, but it's hard to say if they're original or not. So next slide, please. So the current state of PLS monument. By this map, you can see the blue ones are counties that have been doing a good job of remonumentation, and the light tan ones are the ones that either have a lot of PLS corners in their state or in their county, or haven't been doing a good job of maintaining them. Feds gave the authority to the states, who gave that to the counties, and some counties were able to preserve the monuments and some were not. So like I talked about before, less than half the monuments have known locations. So what does the PLS mean to you? Almost every digital map is built on top of it. Accurate data equals accurate results equals better decisions equals better outcomes. So what does that mean? It means data in, good data in means good data out. We got this chart that Preston had showed previously. Remonumentation is number 13, but our feeling is from this committee is that it affects all the ones above it, at least number 1 and number 2. Without having the PLS corners set out there, you're going to have a hard time realigning your county boundaries and other boundaries as well. So, and our parcel data, if you don't have good PLS corners, you don't have real good data as well either. So that relies on number 13 is kind of a big key to this whole, it's the glue that holds the rest of these together. So next slide. So the benefits of preserving the PLS corners. Some counties have all the corners set. They've been maintaining their parcels from those corners for a long time. This data on the right-hand side is from Hennepin County. 95% of their parcels are within 2.2 feet. So, and that's pretty darn good in my book. I don't know if Douglas County is that close, but other counties, you start looking at their parcel data, you see lines going through houses and through different things, and you know that the parcels aren't where they're supposed to be. So hopefully we can fix that with getting these corners set. Next slide, please. Grant County pilot project. This was a MAX project that we decided to do about 5 years ago after we counted all the corners in the state. MAX wanted to see if they could do a model project somewhere in the state. MAX applied for a $135,000 grant from the LCCMR. We were chosen to do the model project. Grant County was chosen because they did not have a full-time county surveyor, and remonumentation was at a minimum. And I was doing part-time work over there as well, which was kind of why we decided to do that township up in northwestern Grant County. We developed a model RFP for other counties to use. We had 5 companies apply. We interviewed all five and chose one. The chose company did all the measuring, remonumentating monuments, and filing the corner certs. Douglas County Surveyor dug 92 of the 139 corners in the township. We were 60% successful, which is very good. Most of the time, you're lucky if you can do 25%. So I was very happy with that. And we now have an entire township done in Grant County, and we can build on that in the future. We also were going to do some right-of-way mapping up in the west side of that township, so that aided in that. Enabled landowners assurance and property location, and solidified the boundary between Grant, Ottertail, and Wilkin, like Preston was talking before, trying to solidify those county boundaries. Next slide. So how are we going to fix this? I mean, there's a lot of work to do out there. I mean, you're talking probably 200,000 corners out there that we need to redo and reset and certify again. So how do we get to make a program to do this? It has to be something to preserve the future of and to perpetuate all the PLS corners in the state and bring all those tan townships up to blue. Next slide. So how how can this be accomplished? We are working on developing legislation for the upcoming session. We are formatting legislation that is similar to Michigan's Remonumentation program. They have had that legislation in place since 1990. They are 80% done with the remonumentation now, but they keep adding corners to it and things they can do with it, money. So they keep working on it. This project, we estimate is about 200 million, but actually I think it's maybe close to 300 million once we're done. So it's not going to be cheap to do, and it's going to take decades to do. And that's kind of the big question now, is where the funding is going to be. We're looking at seeing if we can get it from the general fund, see what happens. And our big thing now is we're looking for support from different organizations. The GIS LAS consortium has wrote us a letter of support. The AMC has on their priority list. We have different organizations that are working on letters in different areas. Just if you know anybody that's a legislator or county commissioner, talk to your county commissioner about it, or your legislator, let them know we're doing this and that we need to get this done. So with that, how are we doing on time?
I think we've got some time left.
Well, time to go through this GIS hub.
Yeah, and there is a there was a question from Marty Moltenhauer in the chat asking for the RFP template. I think reach out to Pat. Pat should have that RFP template that he used for Grant County, and he could get that to you as far as that template goes.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, is there any, before we go to that, Pat, I mean, I think that's a good idea. Is there any other questions that people have regarding Parcel and Land Records Committee, any of the other committee, Pat's committee, my committee, or Ryan and Allison's committee, or just general questions on the Parcel and Land Records? If you want to just put those into the chat, that would be great here. Ooh, crickets.
Well, maybe we should go through the hub quick.
Yeah, we can
click on that.
Yeah, let's see.
You're driving, so.
Yeah, well, let me see if I can find that.
It's in the chat, Preston.
Yeah. Oh, I got it bookmarked here. New share. Let's see here. Did that showing up now?
Yep.
Okay, so the PLSS hub, again, Ryan did put the address in the chat. So you can definitely click on that, save that, use that, share that, let people know. It's actually a pretty nice little hub site we put together. We tried to keep it as straightforward as we can, telling people about a lot of what Pat was talking about. Here's the problem. Here's what's happened in Minnesota. We don't have our PLS monuments reestablished, and we got to figure out a way to reestablish them. And we talk about what the benefits are to the preservation of the PLS to every Minnesotan. And obviously, we're gonna, when we talk to folks in the GIS LAS world, we're going to be talking about parcel data and accurate PLS boundary data and things like that, because those are the things that you see and work with every day. But it's not just you that we're talking about. I mean, we really believe that everybody in the state benefits from a robust PLSS. Everyone from private industry, that question of location, making sure that they know where their boundaries are, is going to, helps all private industries. It helps elected officials make good decisions, as Pat was talking about. Good information equals good decisions. Helps the general public. Every landowner is in one way, shape, or form affected by this. So we put these tiles in here so that you could share it with anyone, and everybody fits in. We figure everybody fits in at least one of every one of these categories, because I think everybody fits in general public. I mean, there's no doubt about that. but you can go ahead and you can click on that, click on in, and it's going to give you some information about all the different ways that the PLSS affects you in these different aspects. And it has some more information, a lot of the stuff we've talked about here today, the status, that blue to tan map that Pat was talking about, the number of corners that are set in the state. We've got a tab about the history of the PLSS so that you can go in and you can get a little bit more history on that. You can look at example corner certificates, learn about what land surveyors actually do. Most people, like I said in my little our poll question, or they're the guys that take pictures on the side of the road. Well, we do a little bit more than that, and this gives you a little bit more of a idea of what the difference between a private sector land surveyor and a county land surveyor is. And then at the bottom here, we have some different PLSS success stories. If you click into this, you can see what Utah's done. They have a nice PLS preservation map. We've got Wisconsin Land Information Association would talk about what they've done, and also the Michigan Remonumentation Act, and what the legislation that this committee's been building is based on that Michigan Remonumentation Act. We feel like they have a really good basis to start from, so we use that and are trying to apply it and adjust it for Minnesota. And what we'd ask everybody in this room to do, is we're going to have a business case. It's still in draft at this point. We have a little bit of an executive summary, but we're still working on that business case. But if you come down here to the bottom, you can see that there's the draft legislation. Go ahead, and this is what the draft legislation looks like. We're basically trying to build a grant program that allows a fund to be developed that will then allow a commission that is going to be developed per this legislation to give out grants to different counties for remonumentation and maintenance of the PLSS. And there's also a letter of support that you can download. If you click on that, you can download that letter and you can modify that letter to your needs and send that to us. There's an email address that we monitor. And you can send that to us so that we can get as much support for this project as possible. And so if you follow these 4 steps, read the legislation, ask us any questions on the committee, support us with a letter, and find your state representatives and let them know that you're in support of this, whether it's you, your county, your whatever association. Maybe it's the Deer Hunters Association. Maybe you feel like it's important to them too. It's not just you, it's really everybody. So this is we're gonna continually update this PLSS hub site to try and make people aware of what's going on. Okay. Ooh, we are getting some questions in the chat here. So how much time do we have, Andy?
We're supposed to be done at 2:30, I believe. So we got about 10 minutes.
We got about 10 minutes. Okay.
Maybe.
So let's try and get to the questions, because we did ask people to put questions in there. Is there any discussion of standardizing the use class fields? This seems to be a free for all for a moment, but a lot of similar fields. Ryan, do you have any insight on that?
Yeah, I can take that on. So when it comes to the use class, from my experience, a lot of uses and whatnot are set county by county. So it's really hard to be able to actually standardize that across the board because each county assessor does things differently. So it would be difficult to be able to generalize enough to get there. It'd be ideal if we could, but at this point, there's really no discussion on that just because it is such a vast project.
All right. It seems like, okay, so Marty said, seems like missing Lincoln use class, maybe our tax camera providers. Yeah, so I think you kind of addressed that. Nancy asked, how is this work related to MnDOT's geodetic units work? The geodetic unit of MnDOT is primarily focused on horizontal and vertical control And that's not necessarily, it's related to the PLSS, but it's not necessarily maintenance of the PLSS. So they figure, they're working with NGS, and they maintain the control networks that allow us to then update and do all our work on known geodetic coordinate systems. So we do work with them. We do actually have Pete Jenkins, I believe he's the oil director. He is on board on the committee, and we've been working with MnDOT on this project as well. They're definitely a supporter as we're moving forward.
Preston, we have another question that Drew from St. Louis County submitted through the Q&A aspect.
Okay.
You want me to take that one?
Sure.
So the question is, what are some of the obstacles, concerns that other counties outside the cities and metro have raised with regards to implementing the state parcel standard? That is what we're trying to seek out, Drew. That's when we get ready to reach out to the counties with our questions and stuff, that is something that we were hoping to be able to get answers on. So hopefully sometime beginning of next year, middle of summer, we'll actually have more detailed information on that, so we can start really formulating how to help these counties overcome those obstacles.
Hey, Ryan, this is Alison. I just wanted to add to that, that the GAC Outreach Committee did do a survey out to counties a few years ago now, and the results of that I'll put in the chat or on the MnGeo website under the Outreach Committee. Asking counties exactly that question. So some of it I think is about cost, but I think it'll be good when Ryan and team ask counties again, maybe there's updated information.
All right. Does anybody have any other questions, or anybody on the panel have anything they want to add? Any more soapboxes you want to stand on?
I guess I would just add that we're looking for members for all these different subcommittees, that anybody that's willing to help, we're more than welcome to add anybody that would be willing to help. So join a committee, get involved.
Absolutely. And it's been really easy. I mean, I think we all know with the whole new world we live in with COVID, it's made these types of committees actually a lot easier to work on, because you don't have to meet in person. We've got, videos. We're doing video meetings constantly. You can just pop in and pop out as you need. We now have a SharePoint for the Parcel and Land Records Committee where we can share all of our documents. So it's not emailing documents back and forth in different versions like, I'm sure it was in the past. So things are pretty smooth and pretty efficient these days. And it's been a lot of fun working with all the people on these different committees. And yeah, we'd absolutely love, like Pat said, we'd love to have your help and your input and your perspective, because every time we get a new committee member, we get a new perspective, and that helps. It helps us answer questions that maybe we didn't see coming. So please join. And what else can you do? Support the Remonumentation project. Like I said, if you can, kind of help us to get that thing going, whether it's, even if it's just you reaching out to your representative, or maybe it's a county, or again, it's some association that you work with. We'd love yours and their support. Support open data in your organization, just in general. If you can support open data and you can start talking about the importance of open data and sharing data and what the benefits of sharing data is across jurisdictions, hopefully we can get more and more of these counties to start believing in that and seeing how much better life is when they actually do have open shared data. And it's parcel data, it's PLS control data, it's really any spatial boundary data. Yeah, there may be some things that you want to keep close to the vest, but there's a lot of this stuff that can be shared, and the more you share it, the easier it gets. The easier life is going to get in the long run. Try and align your data within your organization, even if you can't, justify maybe working with the adjacent counties or something like that. When you see that you've got data that's misaligned, don't accept that as being okay. Understand that, I mean, we understand different data came from different sources at different times. Figure out ways to get that data aligned within yourself and within your own boundaries, within your own jurisdiction. If you can align your data within your organization, I think eventually we'll be able to figure out how to align that data with your, you know, your adjacent jurisdictions. And be friendly with your neighbors. That's, you know, pretty much what most surveyors will tell you. Your life's going to be a lot better if you can have a handshake and that cup of coffee with your neighbor than if you're arguing with them about where things are. So, you know, try and get to know your neighbor counties, your neighbor cities, your neighbor jurisdictions, whatever they are, and get along with them and build those relationships. And eventually you're going to be able to start aligning your data with each other, and it's going to be a whole lot easier in the long run. So unless anybody has anything else, I think we can probably give people 5 minutes back of their day. And
Hey, Preston, this is Ryan. I just want to add one thing. As we go here too, the big part of all this too is educating the public. We really didn't touch on that much today, but ultimate goal is educating not just the GIS community, but the general public in general about PLSSS or parcel data standards and stuff like that. It's just getting the word out there and communicating and educating people on how to properly use the data.
absolutely. All right, everybody. Well, I think we'll call it a day. Thank you for attending. Have a good rest of your conference, and hopefully sometime soon we'll see you in person.